Hey guys, Alex here, big time fan of movies, especially car movies, and some people have been asking what my favorite car movies of all time were. Well, I'm gonna just mention my top 30 favorite car movies of all time, and I've got two separate pictures here with a collage showing my favorite car movies, and you'll notice some of these movies shouldn't really be considered a car movie, but a lot of times car movie is a very weird term, because you have movies like Bullitt where it's got one of the best car scenes of all time, but it's not really a car movie, is it? It's more of a detective movie. And then you got movies like Speed Racer, where it's not even using real cars. It's just all like CGI action, but for some reason I happen to love that movie. But if you look at my list, most of my favorite movies, which I consider car movies, my favorites are from the 70s. The 70s was, in my opinion, the best time for car movies. The stunts were awesome. The cars were fantastic. That's not to say modern times haven't produced their own fair share of great car movies. There haven't been many. I'm not a big fan of the Fast and Furious series, to be honest. I'm not a big fan of the Transporter series either, although the TV show Transporter was pretty awesome. But, you know, in recent time, you have movies like Baby Driver, which is, I would probably put that in my top 10 favorite car movies of all time, regardless of time period. Didn't like the cars very much, but the movie was so well crafted that it definitely belongs in my top 10 favorite car movies of all time. Definitely belongs in my top 30 favorite car movies of all time. But yeah, in recent times, you had movies like Mad Max Fury Road, which was an extension of the Mad Max and Road Warrior series. There's some movies I didn't really put in my top 30. Movies like John Wick and John Wick Chapter 2. And that's because, you know, I was pressed for space. Although John Wick 1 had some really good car scenes in that. It had that really awesome Mustang in it. And then later on he switches to a Dodge Charger. And then John Wick 2 has one of my favorite car scenes in modern times. That's where John Wick steals his Mustang back, and then he gets crushed. Unfortunately, the rest of the movie wasn't really my cup of tea. But let's go look at my my list here. So you can see Baby Driver here, and I've got the original Gone in 60 Seconds. That's the original one, and that was made, you know, obviously in the 70s in 1974. And that movie had pretty much every car you can imagine in that movie, but definitely the you know, the crowning jewels, you know, the crowning cars. Well, the crowning cars of that movie would be the 71 Ford Mustang, aka Eleanor, and he stole a few of those in the movie. Great car. I liked it way better than the Mustang Eleanor that they steal in the remake Gone in 60 Seconds. But you can see the other car movies here. I've got the remake Vanishing Point, starring Viggo Mortensen in '97. Most people would consider this a sin to consider the remake on this list, but don't worry, I also have the original Vanishing Point on my list as well. But I think the remake Vanishing Point has a better storyline. It's a lot more, it's cooler. But the original movie was definitely a lot more existential. So if people like that, they can go to that. Brings out your inner hippie. And then, yeah, back to the movies that you can't really consider a car movie, like Phantasm. It still makes my list because the hero does drive my favorite car movie, or my favorite car of all time. That's the 71 Plymouth Cuda. And that's definitely not the focal point of that movie, but because it's my favorite car in cinema history, then I have to put Phantasm 1 on my list. But I also put Phantasm 3, Lord of the Dead. And in that, the hero drives a convertible Cuda throughout the movie, and it gets a lot more screen time than the Cuda in Phantasm 1. And then you can see I have a lot of like sci-fi movies, sci-fi-ish movies, like Cherry 2000, The Last Chase, the Mad Max series, and I guess Death Race 2000, Back to the Future, Speed Racer. Yeah, that's more of a sci-fi twist to them. Great, like, fun movies. They all appeal to me. Last Chase is pretty fun. If you guys haven't seen it, it stars Lee Major, where he drives a 72 917 Porsche, and he gets chased around by a freaking Sabre jet. And it's the movie, most people consider it so bad. In fact, a lot of people consider it so bad that it ended up in Mystery Science Theater. That doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It just means it was a fun movie, I guess. Then there's some more modern movies that made my list, like The Highwaymen. Not the best car scenes of all time, but I love the whole premise of it. You know, Jim Caviezel, he's a star. His wife is run over by this Cadillac, so he spends the rest of his life pursuing this Cadillac. So he listens to the radio, and he drives around in this old Barracuda. So I love the premise of that movie. It's fantastic. And then fast forward to Transit. That's also starring Jim Caviezel, where he's being chased around by this really awesome Chevelle. And that definitely makes my list of modern movies. And then Death Proof also makes my list of modern movies. Now, Death Proof is interesting. That was directed by Tarantino. Not my favorite director, but he made one of my favorite modern car movies of all time. And this movie was actually made in, oh my gosh, 2007. But it was cool because Tarantino understood that the best car movies were from the 70s, so his two main movie vehicles were homage vehicles. So you had the white 70 Challenger, which was a homage to the Vanishing Point Challenger. And then you had the 69 Dodge Charger, which wasn't really based on any particular design. But, you know, one of the best cars of the 70s was the 69 Dodge Charger, which featured in Crazy Larry, Dirty Mary. And in that movie, they drive a 69 Dodge Charger. And I believe the license plate also matches that of Crazy Larry, Dirty Mary. But the main car in Death Proof, well, the first car in Death Proof was my favorite. That was the Chevy Nova, which I don't think that car was based on any car in particular, but the car was freaking fantastic. And that movie used all practical car stunts, so Tarantino, he understood, you know, where the best car effects came from, and that's from the 70s. Then you had movies like Drive, which didn't really feature the best car scenes, but overall had a car theme to it. And it's one of those movies, it was just a fantastic movie all around, even though no car scenes really stood out. And then, of course, the Mad Max series, featuring the Ford Falcon, the 73 Ford Falcon, made for the post-apocalypse. And that was a very low-budget movie, but it ended up paying dividends in the end. Although when the cast signed up for that movie, they all got a very low lump sum up front. So no one really made much money off that movie, except for the, well, you know. But that was one of the best post-apocalyptic franchises of all time, spawning 4 movies. My favorite were the first two, Road Warrior and Mad Max, starring Mel Gibson. And yeah, so you can see my list here. If you guys have any questions about my list, feel free to ask me. My favorite Camaro movies of all time would be Eat My Dust, which starred Ron Howard. I think that was a 68 Camaro. And it was orange, so it kind of preceded the exploits of the General Lee. And then I have Aloha, Bobby and Rose, which also had my other favorite Camaro in movie history. And you know, I mean, you see the Camaro for a pretty big chunk of the movie, and it's just a fantastic snapshot of the 70s. That's why I love that movie. Speaking of snapshots, American Graffiti, which was made past the time period that it represented, but it did a good job of recreating that time period. It showed that, you know, late night time where teens were just kind of driving around on the streets with their hot rods, just having a good time. I want to point out what my favorite car movie of all time is, guys. And it was made very early on in car history, well, in cinematic car history, and that was the two-lane blacktop, made in 1971. And one of those cars also appeared in American Graffiti, the one that Harrison Ford drives. You guys just have to watch Two-Lane Blacktop. It's a beautiful movie. You don't even have to like cars or car movies. You just have to like art in cinema, and Two-Lane Blacktop definitely accomplishes that. And you can see two movies here that feature Burt Reynolds, Now, you might think my favorite would be Smokey and the Bandit, but it's not. My favorite Burt Reynolds movie of all time is White Lightning, made in 1973. I loved Smokey and the Bandit. It was a funny movie, but I think the funniness also led me to not rate it as highly as White Lightning, which was a more serious movie. God, it's such a great Burt Reynolds movie. I actually had the pleasure of meeting Burt Reynolds a few years ago when he came to Orlando. Got a picture with him and a Trans Am. It wasn't the one from the movie, but it was a Trans Am. The important thing was it was Burt Reynolds, one of my favorite actors of all time. One of the last movie stars, too, if you consider that term movie star to be anything. But yeah, that's my list of 30 favorite car movies of all time. Let me know what you guys think of my list, and let me know what movies you guys would include in your top 30. Now, I got more favorite car movies, but I had to narrow it down to 30. And I bet you if you ask me next year, my list would probably change next year. Although some movies will never leave that list, like Two-Lane Blacktop, Baby Driver, Mad Max. But yeah, tell me what your thoughts are. Thanks for watching this.